Hey, I'm Matt Peeples, founder director of the Kairos Network, and also a local church pastor, and have been a church planter. And I'm here with Pete Mueller, one of my buddies, fellow church planter, fellow network director and trainer. And we decided it would be really important when we're talking about this vitality thing to have a conversation about Sabbath. Because I don't know about you, Pete, but for me, this was the hard lesson I had to learn twice. The first time, I'm fresh out of seminary, I'm in church plant training in a really high impact, incredible ministry, doing some just awesome things. I got to be a part of like 87 baptisms my second weekend of ministry, and the first weekend was installation. So you can imagine just the really cool things God was doing, but in the midst of those really cool things, I was neglecting a really important principle, and it was to take a Sabbath, a day of rest. And I went over almost probably about 2 months plus without taking a day off. And all of a sudden, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, what in the world just happened? And I looked back and I was like, oh, I'm not taking a day of rest. I was single at the time, so I could pour everything I had into ministry. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I'm not going to make that mistake again.
So this is where we get to the twice,
yeah.
Right? Okay.
Fast forward not even 6 months.
Yeah.
I'm now through church plant training, and I'm planting my own ministry in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I had thought to myself, nothing's going to get busier or faster paced than church plant training. And then I got into actual church planting, and it got faster. And all of a sudden, I made the same mistake I made the first. It's like I got to keep driving this thing. I got to keep moving. So I didn't once again take a day off for a month and a half, maybe 2 months, something like that. And all of a sudden, it hit me like a ton of bricks again. And I found myself just burning out, going, "Why am I sitting here feeling leveled?" And the reality was, I wasn't taking a Sabbath. And I remember reading the book that Wayne Cordero wrote out of the video that we had you guys check out, Leading on Empty, and just realizing, oh, there's an important thing to this rhythm God calls us to in Sabbath. And when we don't take it, the problem is it doesn't hit you that week, or maybe even that next week. Right. But when it hits you, it becomes so hard to recover from, because you're so depleted and drained.
Matt, I wish that we could say that your incident was an isolated case, but I think all of us have a story like that. The details are different, but especially energetic, engaged people with a lot of potential that are really driven by a desire to see people come into faith from death to life. The stakes are high, and we are filled with a lot of plans on how we're going to do this. And I've got my own stories. The details are just different. I wish I could just laugh at your story that you didn't learn this, but I keep learning and relearning it.
Oh, man. And I tell you what, I think I'll never forget sitting in Dr. Meyer's class. I was sitting in seminary. He was teaching Hom 2, and of all places, in Homiletics 2, our second preaching course, Dr. Meyer starts talking to us about the importance of Sabbath. And he says, you guys aren't taking a Sabbath? And we're like, no, we're in seminary. We're trying to do all this work. We're trying to do these good things for God. And I'll never forget him saying, a couple important things about Sabbath are, number one, it's God's way of blessing you. It's God's way of saying, I want you to enjoy this world I created. You were not created for work. Like, that's not your core purpose. Your core purpose is, you're my child, and a part of Sabbath is getting to enjoy God's creation. And he said the other big part of it is, it's a reminder that you are not God, and the world doesn't revolve around you. And I think oftentimes when we skip Sabbath, especially in ministry, it's not just about us setting a bad example for the people we're trying to lead. It's about us starting to believe that false assumption that this ministry spins around us.
Yeah. There's so much that can be explored with this, and there are a lot of great resources on these topics. But I have to ask, why am I not taking a Sabbath? And you're starting to get into some of those issues, and sometimes it is the idea that nobody else can do this as well as I can. Other times it's control. Other times there's some deep value issues. One of the things that we have you do is go through the Enneagram, which is a great tool for spiritual directors to work with somebody, because you start to get at some of the things that are really driving you from early on. Not to psychoanalyze this, but there is a lot of deeper stuff behind that. I do like what you said, though, about how many times we don't see the result of that right away, because many times you're still on the spiritual high. And so you're basically putting a harvest away for a time that's going to show up later. And I found the same thing my first few years in ministry. I was saving the world. It was up to me. Things were going great. And for me, it was probably 5 years before it really hit me hard. But for about 4.5 years, I had been basically storing up in these barns the harvest that I was reaping for myself.
Yeah, and I think, that's really kind of a vitally important point. It gets my mind going on a few things is, this is an important principle to get in your life. It's one of those why principles. It transcends culture. Every culture has different rhythms, but that temptation is the same, to think that the world spins around you, to think that, you are your work, instead of working out of who you are in Christ, which is, for a planter, for anybody it's vitally important, but especially for a church planter. And so, as we talk about Sabbath, I think what I want to do is share some of our own Sabbath rhythms, and Pete's got a great kind of like annual Sabbath rhythm that I think is really helpful to kind of think about. But I want you to see that we may Sabbath a little bit differently, but that core why principle is the same. We're going to take some separated time to rest from our work, to remember that we are loved by God because of Christ and not because of what we do for Christ, and then to be refreshed in that time by Him.
Yeah. So for me, I was in my 20s, and it was still in that, kind of critical time where I was still really hurting from having worked too hard, having not taken a day off. I was having too much fun. Why would I take a day off? But there was a cassette tape that somebody handed me. This is back in the days. This is like 3 technological revolutions ago. But there was a cassette tape. Someone had been to a conference, and a man by the name of Rick Warren, who I'd never really heard of before, had spoken in this workshop, and he talked about a 3-part pattern that really saved my life. And it's simply this: divert daily, withdraw weekly, abandon annually. It's a very simple construct. Every day, divert. So when you go to work, whatever, work hard, but every day, take a step back from that work. So as Rick Warren spoke about it, he had little kids at home, so he said for him, he'd get home maybe at 3:30 in the afternoon, and he would roll around on the floor with his kids. He'd wrestle with his kids, and then he would get restored, and even if he had to go back for an evening meeting, that was enough. And he said, whatever it is for you, find what it is that restores your soul again, but do that every day. Don't have a single day where you go hard bore from sun up to sundown without any kind of a break. Find the kind of things that fuel back your own soul. Then weekly, withdraw weekly, take a day off. Again, that's one that I hear so many pastors, church leaders, church planters say, I know that I am supposed to take Mondays off, but I'm really not very good about that. Hear yourself saying that and determine that something's going to change. I find that when somebody gets strung out and maybe angry, they were expecting somebody else to take care of them.
Yeah.
And the only person that can set those boundaries for yourself or for your family is you. And then the final one in that construct is abandon annually. Take a vacation. And again, this is my own story. In my 20s, I was finding myself, I only had 2 weeks of vacation. It's kind of like typical, young guys. But I would find that I wanted to milk that vacation as much as I could. So I would take 2 days off, and I'd scurry back, and I'd take 3 days off over here. But I would never be gone for very long, and I certainly wasn't gone long enough to equip somebody else to lead in my absence.
Yeah.
I would simply work harder before I left, and then I would work hard when I came back. I had a friend named Grace. She would always say, no good vacation goes unpunished. And we would feel that when we'd come back, because it's like, oh man, all this work to do now. But that, practicing that little thing, divert daily, withdraw weekly, abandon annually, is something that I practice to this day.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge help. I think some of the things is think about when you Sabbath on that, because like the divert daily is brilliant. And I think realize it's okay to put the phone to the side. We're in a 24/7 culture a lot, and we think, oh, well, what if I don't answer this email? Well, what if you don't answer the email? What if somebody has to wait an hour? Big deal. What if the voicemail catches that call? It'll be okay. Yeah. I think what we have to realize is this is about you being healthy so that you can pour into people. Because if you're not healthy, you can't pour into people for ministry. I think when you're looking at that weekly rhythm, pick a day that fits your personality, your family flow, and your ministry flow. And so what I mean by that is, for me, my Sabbath is Friday. The reason the Sabbath is Friday is because Saturday is a flex day, which means if I have some work stuff, I'll do it. If I don't have work stuff, I'm not going to force myself to find work to do around. Like, I work hard enough the other days of the week. But Friday is like a hard stop. I like Friday because Friday is far enough removed from Sunday where if I don't do any message prep stuff, and I don't on my Sabbath, like, my brain's probably working on it in the background, but I can take that full day of rest, and I don't have that tension from some days. Some guys try to take off a Saturday, and that's a terrible time in ministry to take off. It's a terrible time because people generally get married on a Saturday. People generally have other activities on a Saturday, and then what's happening on Sunday, for a lot of people, that's their big worship service. So I don't think Saturday is really your day to try, but I picked Friday because it works for me. Pete, you usually do Thursday, right?
Yeah, we do Thursday. And when I was first in ministry, I took Mondays off, and that was the pattern of the senior pastor where I was doing youth ministry. And I came to love Mondays. But I would feel as Sunday went on, we'd finish worship, and sometimes we had youth ministry stuff Sunday nights or afternoon. But as Sunday went on, I would just feel this, I came to just love Mondays. But then I went to work at a mega church, actually, and Monday is where the busiest day of the week. That was when all the secretaries were together. We were following up on weekend contacts, and suddenly this, the Sabbath, right, of counting on Mondays, suddenly that was just gone. And I had to figure out a new rhythm, and landed on Thursdays.
Now why Thursday?
Yeah, because for us too, Friday was so much about production, getting ready for the weekend. Monday was so much about following up on the weekend. And I found when I tried to take Fridays off, I would usually get called into a project because something had changed, or we had, come up with a drama we were going to use, or the video changed, or whatever it was. And so Thursday became kind of that magic point through which I could balance the work from the previous weekend and week into having a break before what was coming up next.
That's smart. Now, see, what I love about that is, we didn't pick the same day, but we picked the day that worked for us in that rhythm, and that day can shift. Like, when I was on my internship, I had to take Monday because the church I was at had the philosophy that they always wanted somebody in the office.
Right.
Like the church that I lead here, my philosophy is I would rather everybody be in the office at the same time so we can all kind of click, and rather have all of us have the same Sabbath rhythm. So that's kind of how we do that. But if somebody was like, I just can't Sabbath on a Friday, like I had a really great preaching professor, Dr. Utek, who he said, build your Sabbath rhythm based on what Sunday kind of does to you. So think about it like this. I'm an extrovert. I'm an Enneagram 7. Sunday energizes me. Monday, I could get up and conquer the world because Sunday was such a blast, you know? And even when I'm tired on a Sunday, like at the end of the day, like I'm still energized, right? For somebody that's more introvert, they gain their energy from being alone a little bit. Sunday can be the most draining experience of the week. And so being able to have a Monday where you can just chill is vitally important. And it's whatever's right for you. The other thing I would encourage you, though, is also think about what's right for your family's rhythm, because you also don't want to pick a Sabbath where you're giving your family the worst.
Right.
And so it's like, oh, well, I'm terrible this day, so I don't, I'll take this as a Sabbath, and your family's looking around going, he's always mopey on his day off.
I'll bring you my worst, right?
Yeah. So really, if you have a family that's a part of ministry, factor that in as well. Yeah.
No, this is a very important conversation, and whatever it ends up being for you, our prayer is that you would stay healthy, balanced, and in the long haul. It's not a sprint. We know that.
So keep working on your personal vitality, and we'll continue with the training.